What are the 5 most common mistakes I see athletes making at their first 70.3? So you've done it, you've entered your first race, you completed it, and you had a bun fight in the water, you got kicked and punched, you didn't realize that you'd get through transition quite beaten up, feet wet, sandy, and people passing you on the bike like you were standing still, like rocket ships, and you were half dead on the marathon, you were half dead on the half marathon, and you had to walk a lot. Now, you're addicted and you're determined to fix it. So in this video, I'm going to cover some real simple things that I see time and time again with some of my athletes and certainly newbies that are easily rectified for your second or third one. So this is you, listen up, and I'm sure you'll learn something and hopefully you can apply it in your next race. First of all, starting of course early on in the race with the swim, getting into the wrong start pen. So now and for a long time, Ironman have self-seeded you into sub 30 minutes, 30 to 35, 35 to 40, etc. minutes for your half Ironman swim. Now, if it's your first time, you have no idea how long it's going to take you. And you are normally quite feared. You normally fear, should I say, the swim portion of the race. Of course, it's open water. There's a few hundred of you and you're going 5 of you every couple of seconds into the water, and they've created this environment so you have less anxiety. So what happens is people overestimate their time. They say, I'm going to swim 35 minutes, but actually they're a 40-minute swimmer. So they'll go in the sub 35-minute pen. This generally happens to 60-70% of the races, but the humble athletes tend to go, right, I'm realistically around 34, 35, so I'll hold back. I'll go in the 35 to 40 and swim my way through and feel relaxed. What actually happens is you end up just getting held up all the time because people overestimate their swim time. So they'll say they're a sub 30-minute swimmer and they're a 32, 34-minute swimmer because they want to get to the front of the race out of the way, but actually it messes up everyone else's race because you end up swimming over bodies. You ruin their race because they freak out because you're going over them. Plus, you get super frustrated, heart rate goes up with tension and you get pissed off. So get in the right start pen. If anything, move up, I think, into a slightly faster time category because you get sucked along. As soon as there's loads of swimmers in front of you, unless you're going off with the sub 25-minute lot, you're going to have people ahead of you and you know who you are. And if you come from a swim background and you know you can get away, get ahead. Don't think you're going to hold back because you're a weaker triathlete and you're slow on the bike. Get away from the crowds and get up to the front. Back yourself, have confidence, and of course, ideally you practice this a little bit in training unless you're coming straight from cold weather and you can't get into open water. That's the first critical error. Have a real think about where you are in your race and what actually happened at your first 70.3. Now, you felt like your preparation was superb and you thought you could conquer everything on race day. You've covered 70, 80 kilometers of training perhaps, or even the full 90, 56 miles. So you're confident, and it isn't a super long day, and majority of triathletes, first timers, will absolutely have a great day. What I tend to find and see is they overbike. So they do not understand the strategy to use around pacing for 56 miles, 90 kilometers. Now, it's easy to say hold back or see how you feel, which is really important. Feel is everything. So some of us use power meters, some of us use at least power and heart rate. Now, there's a lot of different theories around what percentage of your threshold you should ride at. And if you're a seasoned 70.3, so experienced, intermediate and above, you can probably operate at a higher percentage. So just understand that. Versus if you're a beginner, your first, second time, you're better off holding back and underbiking because, yes, you know it, you'll have more legs and carbohydrate storage for the run. You're better off coming off the bike saying, geez, I should have ridden harder. You probably got your pacing right. So in terms of power, what I like to get people to ride, it's quite a big range, 85 to about 91% of their true threshold. So if you go and ride as hard as you can for 45 minutes up to an hour, that should be technically your threshold on a bike, ideally outside in your environment that you're quite used to. If you can't do that, you can do it on a turbo. Working at as a percentage of that, bear in mind if you've done all the training to get there, that should save your legs and restore, spare some glycogen, some carbohydrates for the run. Similarly, if you're working with heart rate, it's a slightly higher percentage of your threshold heart rate. 86 to 91%, more on the lower side for beginners, first timers, of your threshold heart rate. Okay, so if 100% is of course around about your Olympic distance heart rate, or your average heart rate you can hold for 45 minutes to an hour on the bike, at that 86 to 91% of that as a percentage value. That's a nice safe environment to be in. Obviously if you're unsure, just work on the low end. Keep your ego at bay, okay? Females are really good at this, males aren't so good. Coupled with that biking, I'm going to include under point 2.2 is transition training. A lot of people ignore that, certainly beginners, and they storm out of the water, run really fast because they want to make up time because they might be a good runner. You've lost time in the water and all the blood is in the upper body, nothing really in your legs. You might have kicked the last few hundred meters. Upright, blood pressure change, heart rate goes to the roof. So you get on the bike with a heart rate in the 160s. A, because you haven't practiced the transition and the faff it takes to get your bag, put your helmet on, race belt, wheel your bike out, and often it's a couple of hundred meters of a jog with your tri-bike or your road bike through transition. The whole time the heart rate's up, your feet are quite dirty, sandy, potentially you've slipped. Practice this, I promise you it's gold. It's just free time, and like anything, a bit like driving lessons, you do 6 of those, you can drive a car. So I'm putting that under the biking because you've started your biking. Right, you still with me? Okay, the third thing, yes, I can't not touch on fuel and hydration. I'm not going to go into an in-depth, but what I find is they train on the carb drink, the hypertonic carb solution drink, 6%, potentially some gels, and they either overdo it on the bike because it's race simulation day, or they actually undercook the fueling because they don't really potentially like the sweetness, or they haven't dialed in and practiced at least 4 or 5 times a simulation of what they're going to use on the race day. So they overdo the carb drink or the gels or both, get quite sloshy and bloated, and then they pay for it, unfortunately, when they start getting upright and running. So you know it. You've got to have a proper fueling strategy now that you've learned from your first one. Understand what's on race course. That's quite easy to work with now. Currently, as we stand beginning of 2025, it's Morton and Precision Fuel and Hydration. You can easily separate things and work with your hydration and fueling to understand actually what you're doing, so you get used to your grams per hour that you're going to target. Start low and build up. Higher is not better, especially if you're a beginner, you're working at a slightly lower percentage. You don't have to burn through as much, so actually less is more. Most of us overdo it. Something that's completely underrated is understanding the course. Now that might seem a bit strange to you in terms of not a hierarchy. You look on the map, or you might go, oh, it's in Valencia, oh, it's in Mallorca, and you just kind of go, oh, I'm great on hills. Or you've got to understand where the aid stations are, what the wind is probably doing. There's great apps out available to understand where you might have a headwind, where you know when to push. So you have to push into a headwind. It's like going uphill. But then when you have a tailwind, that's actually when you just really get quite aerodynamic and rest, and that's a good time to eat some solids potentially, bring the heart rate down. You balance out your race. So you've got to understand where, what, and how, and what the sun's doing, the wind, and obviously understand the weather for that day, which you probably know a couple of days out. So understanding the course, if you get a chance to recce the course, even better, but most of us travel somewhere, you might only get there a day or two, so you might be able to ride part of the course, I understand that, or it's in a city. But understand, watch some videos, read some of the notes from people, all online. It's all accessible now. And most people go in blind, and they potentially think, oh, I've ridden 60 Ks, 90 will be okay. Things change after 2 hours of pushing at that intensity. You might not be able to absorb certain amount of calories that you did in training. So understand where the aid stations are. There's normally 2 on a 70.3. Carry enough fuel for at least 2 hours and understand where you're going to get that on the course. The 5th thing, of course, the run is left, so no guesses for what I'm going to talk about. What athletes do, and runners do this all the time, they go out at a pace that they think, so 5 minutes a kilometer, 8 minutes a mile. They've done it in training, so they try and stick to this pace. But what we're realizing is you've woken up at 4 or 5 a.m., you've swum, been out of your comfort zone, you've biked fairly solid for 2.5 to 3.5 hours in different variable weather conditions, normally quite hot. There's a fatigue and a durability issue here, so you are quite new to it. You don't have that engine potentially. So instead of going out to a set prescribed pace, yes, feel is amazing and you should know your feel. Understanding what your heart rate is doing in terms of your zones, and people don't build into the run. They go out at a pace which they can sustain for 5Ks, and at about 7 or 8 the wheels come off. Generally due to the sun, poor nutrition on the bike, so their tummy's sloshy and they're not absorbing the gel now they've taken and the emergency Coke. So rather build in, I always like to say, guys and girls, get to 10Ks, so roughly halfway, 6 miles, 6.5, and then ignore, I don't mind what you do, heart rates, pace, you can go for it. Most people will then try to pick it up, but actually, if anything, they held it or slightly slowed. Your second half will generally be a bit slower. If you can negative split and build in slower and have that confidence to hold back, I promise you, you'll reel in people because you paced properly on the bike and you held back on the first portion of the run. It's about 2 hours of running on average for beginners. It's a really long time to be out there, especially after a hard bike. So in summary, there you have it. There's some 5 common mistakes that I hope set you up and you can implement straight away into your next race. I'd love to know how you get on. So please subscribe to the channel, watch some of my other videos, and also just feel free to comment and get in touch with me via the channel. I'd love to try and help you if I can. If there's anything you need questions answering, and yeah, best of luck for the next races. And it's a great distance. You can do a few of them in a season, and see you at the races.